Right now, your brain is either in a peak performance window or actively recovering from one, and it has been switching between those two states every 90 minutes since you woke up. Most people spend their peak window answering emails. By the end of this video, you will have a precise biological scheduling protocol that tells you exactly when to do your most important work. And it will recover between 90 minutes and 2 hours of lost cognitive output every single day. This is not about sleep schedules or morning routines. This is about a biological rhythm that sleep scientists have studied for decades, one that governs your focus, your decision quality, and your willpower in a predictable, measurable cycle. Once you know the pattern, you can map your entire workday around it. The protocol takes less than 5 minutes to set up and requires zero lifestyle overhaul. Here's exactly how it works. In the 1950s, sleep researcher Nathaniel Kleitman, the same scientist who discovered REM sleep, identified something unexpected. The 90-minute sleep cycle he had mapped in the brain at night did not stop when people woke up. It continued throughout the day in a modified form. He called it the basic rest activity cycle, or BRAC. Your brain oscillates between high neurological arousal and a recovery state roughly every 90 minutes, every hour of every waking day. The problem is that modern work culture was built with no awareness of this cycle whatsoever. The result, the average professional is doing their most cognitively demanding work during a biological recovery state, which costs them on average 2 to 3 hours of genuine deep work output every single day. Not because they are lazy, because they are working against their own neurology. Here is the precise mechanism most people never understand. Each 90-minute Ultradian cycle has two distinct phases. The first 70 to 80 minutes is the performance phase. Your brain is flooded with acetylcholine and norepinephrine, neurochemicals that sharpen focus, accelerate pattern recognition, and make complex problem-solving feel almost effortless. This is your biological peak window. Then, in the final 10 to 20 minutes of the cycle, those neurochemicals drop. Your brain shifts into a recovery phase, signaling fatigue, reduced concentration, and an almost involuntary pull toward distraction. Here is where the damage happens. Most professionals feel that pull toward distraction and obey it instantly. They check their phone, open Slack, scroll through their inbox, but they do not stop there. They stay in that low-value behavior and carry it directly into the next performance phase. So instead of entering the next 70-minute peak window sharp and ready, they enter it already fragmented. The practical consequence: a professional who ignores these transitions loses, on average, the first 20 to 30 minutes of every subsequent peak window to mental residue from the distraction they just chose. Across a standard workday with 3 to 4 Ultradian cycles, that is 60 to 120 minutes of peak cognitive capacity evaporated. The takeaway here is simple but non-negotiable. You must learn to recognize the recovery signal, the mental fatigue, the urge to context switch, as a biological cue, not a personal failure. It is your brain asking for a specific type of rest, and if you give it the right kind, the next peak window arrives stronger. The average professional checks their phone 96 times per day. Most of those checks happen precisely at the recovery signal, at the exact moment the brain needed structured rest, not more stimulation. So the first practical challenge is knowing when your peak windows actually occur. Because Ultradian cycles are biological, they are not perfectly synchronized to the clock. They are synchronized to your wake time. The first performance phase of your day begins approximately 30 minutes after waking, once adenosine has cleared enough for neurochemical arousal to peak. From that point, you can map your cycles forward in 90-minute blocks. If you wake at 6:30 a.m., your first peak window runs roughly from 7 to 8:10 a.m. Your second runs from 8:30 to 9:40 a.m., and so on. The 20-minute recovery gap between each is not optional. It is structural. Now, there is an additional variable that the research makes very clear. Not all peak windows are created equal. The first 2 cycles of your day carry the highest concentration of dopamine and norepinephrine, meaning your best creative thinking, your hardest decisions, and your most demanding analytical work belong in those first two windows, without exception. A study published in the journal Cognitive Psychology found that decision quality degraded by up to 40% in the afternoon compared to morning peak windows, even when participants reported feeling equally alert. The professional consequence of this is severe. If you are spending your first two peak windows on email, administrative tasks, or meetings that could have been a message, you are making your hardest decisions with a neurologically inferior brain later in the day. The actionable protocol. This week, write down your wake time, calculate your first 4 peak windows, and protect the first 2 for singular, high-stakes cognitive work. No meetings, no messages, no exceptions. This single structural change is what separates consistent high performers from everyone else who complains about not having enough time to think. A 40% drop in decision quality. That is not a bad afternoon. That is a different brain, and most professionals are making their highest stakes choices in exactly that state. Now comes the part most productivity advice gets completely wrong. The 20-minute recovery window between ultradian peaks is not a break in the casual sense. It is a neurological requirement, and the type of rest you choose during it determines whether your next peak window arrives at full power or at a fraction of it. Research from the Weizmann Institute of Science shows that offline rest, meaning rest with no external input, dramatically accelerates memory consolidation and cognitive restoration. Specifically, a 10 to 20-minute period of genuine low-stimulation rest, with no screens, no audio content, and no social interaction, allows the brain's default mode network to process and integrate the information from the previous peak window. The practical translation: if you use your recovery window to scroll social media, listen to a podcast, or join a casual call, you are feeding your brain stimulation when it needs consolidation. You are preventing the very restoration that would make your next peak window powerful. The professionals who do this correctly use their recovery windows for exactly 3 things: a brief walk with no audio, slow breathing or eyes closed rest in a dim environment, or light non-cognitive physical movement like stretching. None of these require a meditation practice or a gym membership. What they require is a deliberate choice to not fill the window with stimulation. The measurable outcome of doing this correctly. Research from the NIH found that subjects who took structured offline rest between cognitive sessions showed a 20% improvement in performance on subsequent tasks compared to those who filled the gap with passive media consumption. That 20% compounds across every cycle in your day. Across a 5-day work week, structured recovery between ultradian peaks is worth approximately 3 to 4 additional hours of high-quality output, not by working more, but by restoring the brain that does the work. 3 to 4 hours of recovered output per week, not from working harder, not from sleeping more, just from doing nothing for 20 minutes in the right way. Here is the loop opened at the start of this video. The biology says your brain hits peak cognitive power on a precise schedule. So why do most people destroy it right at that moment? The answer is that without a structural system, peak windows are invisible. You do not feel them arriving. You only feel them leaving, as fatigue, distraction, and the pull towards something easier. The full ultradian scheduling protocol closes that gap by making the invisible visible. Here is the complete system, deployable today. Step 1. Calculate your personal window map. Take your average wake time, add 30 minutes, and mark your first peak start time. From there, block 75-minute deep work sessions, not 90, because leaving a 15-minute buffer before the recovery phase prevents you from being mid-task when cognitive decline hits. Step 2. Schedule your 2 hardest, most cognitively demanding tasks into windows 1 and 2. These are the tasks where decision quality and creative depth matter most. Everything else, email, administrative work, low-stakes meetings, belongs in windows 3 and 4. Step 3. Set a physical alarm for the end of each 75-minute block. When it sounds, stop working regardless of where you are in the task. Take 15 to 20 minutes of offline rest using one of the 3 methods described earlier. Step 4. Protect this structure from meeting culture. The single most common way professionals destroy their Ultradian schedule is by allowing meetings to be placed in peak windows by default. Block your first 2 peak windows as busy in your calendar. Communicate that your availability for synchronous meetings begins after window 2. This is not a luxury. It is a cognitive asset protection strategy. The professionals who operate on this system consistently report that their output quality in 3 structured hours exceeds what they previously produced in 6 unstructured ones. That is not a motivational claim. That is what happens when you stop fighting your own biology and start working with its precision instead. Here's something worth reflecting on. Think about your current workday structure and identify the single biggest way your schedule violates your ultradian rhythm right now. Whether that is a standing morning meeting that consumes your peak window, a habit of checking messages the moment cognitive fatigue hits, or no recovery structure between work blocks at all. Drop your answer in the comments. The most common patterns in the responses will shape an upcoming video that goes even deeper into personalized ultradian scheduling for different chronotypes. If this protocol gave you something concrete to act on today, subscribe to Growth Daily. Every Tuesday, one video translates a specific piece of peer-reviewed neuroscience or behavioral psychology into a single, same-day implementable system. Exactly like this one. No motivational filler, no recycled advice, just the research and the protocol. Next Tuesday, the exact neurochemical reason your willpower is structurally depleted by 2 p.m., regardless of how much sleep you got, and the 4-minute reset that restores decision capacity in the middle of your worst afternoon. That video alone will change how you structure your hardest choices. Subscribe so it is waiting for you when it drops.